Good evening. Welcome. This is the Spring 2025 Washin Kai lecture, co-sponsored by Washin Kai and the Department of Asian Languages and Literature. My name is Yumi Iwasaki. I'm the president of Washin Kai, and I'm delighted to welcome you today to a lecture by Professor Davinder Bhowmik. This is our first foray into Okinawan literature, and we are very fortunate to have Professor Bhowmik here at UW, who is actually from Okinawa and is an expert on Okinawan literature. Before we get started, allow me to say a few words about Washin Kai. We started in 2018. We are a volunteer organization to support Japanese literature studies at UW. We have been raising funds to support graduate students and to organize public lectures like today's event. For our lectures, we have had support from Consulate General of Japan in Seattle, as well as publicity help from many community organizations. And today, I would like to give special thanks to Okinawa Kenjin Kai, whose members will present traditional dance, music, and Okinawan treats at the post-lecture reception. And at this time, I would like to recognize some special guests in our audience. We are honored to have Consul General Iori and Mrs. Iori, as well as Deputy Consul General Sumi from the consulate. And thank you very much for joining us this evening. Now, if you were with us at last year's Washin Kai Spring Lecture, you must remember Professor Handel. Professor Handel gave a fascinating talk on adaptation and transformation of Chinese characters into languages across Asia, including Japanese. He's a professor of Chinese and the chair of the department. Today, Professor Handel will kindly introduce Professor Bhowmik.
Hello, everybody. So as you just heard, I'm Zev Handel. I'm chair of the Department of Asian Languages and Literature. I'm delighted to be with you here today for what I think is the 7th annual Spring Marcus Lecture. The lecture series is made possible through the generosity of many donors, through gifts large and small, to the department's Friends of Classical Japanese or Washin Kai Fund, and through the dedicated efforts of the members of Washin Kai, especially those on the organization's steering committee, many of whom are here with us this evening, including Yumi. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement that we're currently located on the unceded land of Coast Salish peoples, land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. Our recognition of the history of this place and of our obligations to that history is not unrelated to the broader themes that connect with this evening's lecture topic, and serves as a reminder that our humanistic investigations of other cultures, times, and places have relevance to our lives here and now. It's my honor and privilege to introduce to you tonight's speaker, my friend and colleague, Professor Davinder Bhowmik. I have known Professor Bhowmik for a long time. We arrived at UW together with temporary appointments as lecturers in autumn 1998, fresh off of our dissertations, hers on Japanese, mine on Chinese. Soon after, we applied for and successfully became professors in the Department of Asian Languages and Literature and have been colleagues here ever since. I just said we arrived here at the same time, and in a sense that's true, but our professional careers did begin here 27 years ago, but Professor Bhowmik is a Husky through and through. She has been here since her college days. She has 2 bachelor degrees, one in English and one in Japanese, both from UW. She received her master's and her PhD degrees from this very department in Japanese literature. Professor Bhowmik's career is a testament to the world-class quality of the University of Washington and to the opportunities that this public institution provides to the citizens of our state and to citizens of the world. At a time when the American system of higher education is under relentless attack from the current president's administration, it's worth reflecting on the importance of our public institutions and the obligation all of us have to support them. Professor Bhowmik's doctoral dissertation, completed under the direction of Professor John Treat, who's in the audience with us tonight, was her first major study in the research area that has remained a focal point throughout her career, Okinawan fiction, and its deep connections to Okinawan culture, society, and politics. While her interests and scholarly contributions have been wide-ranging, including modern Japanese fiction, film, and culture, environmental, regional, post-colonial, and minority literature, and atomic bomb and post-Fukushima literature, there are intellectual and experiential lines connecting them all to this unique place that we now call Okinawa, which was once part of the independent Ryukyu kingdom. Professor Bhowmik is a prolific and talented scholar. She has published over 30 articles, translations, and book reviews. She has given so many scholarly talks and participated in so many workshops, roundtables, and panels at conferences that, looking through her CV, I gave up trying to count them all. She's co-editor of the book Islands of Protest, Modern Japanese Literature from Okinawa, published in 2016 by University of Hawaii Press, and author of the book Writing Okinawa, Narrative Acts of Identity and Resistance, published in 2008 by Routledge. Her next book will be titled Off Base, The Rhetoric of Peace in Military Basetown Literature in Japan. Of her book, Writing Okinawa, one reviewer says, "At last, we have a book-length study in English that explores the rich diversity of modern Okinawan fiction. That fact alone would be cause for celebration, but Davinder Bhowmik's Writing Okinawa does far more than merely fill a gap in extant English language scholarship on Okinawan literature. Through detailed analysis of a wide range of fiction published from the early 20th century to the present day, this book offers diverse perspectives into the region's perpetually shifting, yet ever tenuous relationship with the Japanese state." Another reviewer writes that the book is notable for rich, critical readings and demonstrates a remarkable scope. Of her edited volume, Islands of Protest, a reviewer writes that it makes an important contribution to advancing the field of Okinawan studies within the English-speaking world and is an invaluable addition to existing translations of Japanese literary works by writers from Okinawa and constitutes an immense contribution to enhancing and advancing the fields of Japanese and Okinawan literary studies. Tonight, Professor Bhowmik delves farther back in time. We are indeed fortunate to have the opportunity this evening to benefit from her expertise and insights as she introduces us to Ryukyuan landscapes and identity in the Omoro Sōshi, 1531 to 1623. Please join me in welcoming Professor Davinder Bhowmik.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zev, for that kind introduction. Can you all hear me in the back? Yes? Okay, wonderful. No. Can you hear me now in the front? All right, I will use both this mic and the one at the podium. I hope that my voice won't trail, but if it does, just signal. Thank you again, Zev, for that such a kind introduction. I also want to thank Washin Kai for the generous invitation to speak about an area that I love so much, the Department of Asian Languages and Literature, my home department for so long. Thank you, Zev and Ben and Belle and everyone else who helped for tonight's event. So before I begin discussing Ryukyuan indigenous culture, I'd like to echo Zev and acknowledge that the university sits on the unceded lands of the Ushu speaking peoples, the Duwamish, Muckleshoot, Squamish, Snoqualmie, Tulalip, and Puyallup. I'm grateful to live and work on these lands washed by the Salish Sea. My research is primarily about Japanese fiction from Okinawa, and my current book project is on the intersection of militarization and literature in Japan between 1945 and today, so the last 80 years or so. And yet today, I'm taking on the challenge to speak about a 16th and 17th century compilation of songs, the Omoro Sōshi. So please be patient with me. I hope I can do it justice. The research I've done for this talk has enriched my understanding of early history and culture in the Ryukyu Islands. That much I could foresee. What I didn't imagine is the degree to which the Omoro showcases the prosperity of the Ryukyu kingdom under the reign of Shoshin. The third ruler in the second Shou dynasty, Shoshin captured principalities to the north, Hokuzan, and the south, Nanzang, unifying the Ryukyu Islands. He centralized government in Shuri in the south and enjoyed robust trade with countries in East Asia and Southeast Asia. Here's a photo from the era. This is part of a screen of Naha Harbor. And you can see how many boats fill the harbor. There's a lot of robust trade. Some of the things that these boats carried, pepper, cloves, nutmeg, camphor, gold, tin, ivory, sandalwood, perfumes, and incense, coral, mercury, opium, saffron, wine, cotton, muslin, silk, rosewater, timber, agate, musical instruments. This is all, much of this is happening at the time that of the seclusion in Japan, Sakoku. So there was robust trade going on in Ryukyu. So let me now show you a map. I like this one very much because if you notice in the far right, at the very top, you see Hokkaido and then the rest of the major islands of Japan. So they are decentered, right? So that you can see properly Okinawa Island, which is often in a little corner on a map of Japan. So you'll notice that from in the north there, well, you can't see many of the islands there, but maybe more importantly, these other islands outside of Okinawa, there are over 100 or so of those, half of them inhabited. And they stretch as far as far west as Yonaguni here, which is very close, 400 miles or so to Taiwan. So Yonaguni is closer to Taiwan than half as, yes, Tokyo is about 800 miles from Shuri. So you can see that these islands are much closer to Taiwan. They're facing China. On East China, many of the municipalities and places that flourished were facing China. The Pacific side, there's much less that's going on. Here's another map that I liked that shows the Ryukyu archipelago, and there's Taiwan, as I said, at the very bottom. So the northern Ryukyus, central Ryukyus, and southern Ryukyus. And this is important because the Omoro Sōshi is a collection that primarily contains songs from the central and northern Ryukyus. Okay. All right. So I mentioned Shoshin and his unification of the Ryukyus in the 100 years or so prior to that, to his conquest. He had been engaged in battles with neighboring kingdoms. And once he unified his government in Shuri, he enjoyed that robust trade that I mentioned earlier. But conquest was not enough. To cement the idea of one kingdom under his mighty rule, he established an office of the Nushidori, or chief recorder of the Omoro Sōshi. And its underlying theme is praise for Shoshin's accomplishments, power, and legacy. So what is the Omoro Sōshi? The Sōshi part is easy. It's just a collection, like Otogi Zoshi is a collection of children's stories. It's the Omoro part that's a little bit under debate, or it's been under debate. So this collection of ancient deity songs, Omoro, Kami Uta, some have glossed it, are from the islands of Okinawa and Amami, so central and northern Ryukyus. And there are a couple of theories, different ones, about the term Omoro. Ihafuyu, who is a pioneering linguist and ethnologist from Okinawa, argues about the Omoro's relation to a word omori, or a woods or a sacred grove where songs are sung. In the sacred grove, people in Okinawa call utaki. Another scholar, Nakahara Zenshu, argues that scribes who didn't have good command of Japanese wrote omoro for a verb derived from umui, to think, or thoughts. And because R's tended to be dropped out in Ryukyuan and O's changed to I's, scribes changed umui to omoro. And this shows the kind of hypercorrection that went on as scribes tried to use Japanese script, hiragana, for Ryukyuan language. And it was not a perfect fit. All right. So the Omoro comprises, one more thing about this umui idea. Omoro, or the thoughts of deities, are delivered by priestesses. And today, even today in Okinawa, divine priestesses call their songs umui, which bears Nakahara's theory out. The Omoro comprises 22 volumes and is written primarily in hiragana, which was introduced in about 1187 in Okinawa, or in the Ryukyus. Hiragana is a phonetic syllabary, and along with it, there's some Chinese characters. And again, it's not a precise recording of language as spoken, but a Japanese rendition of old Ryukyuan. Notably, the Omoro incorporates 3 modes of expression before they existed as separate arts. There are the songs, which we can consider as literature. There's music. Each of the songs, almost all of the songs, have at the beginning what melody the song should be sung in. And then the third component is dance. Many of the songs in one volume is devoted exclusively to dance movements. And the notations are often in the footnotes for the songs. So the earliest songs date from the 12th century. The latest ones were composed in the early 17th century. So that's 5 centuries, right? So there are a lot of changes going on in the language, and that contributed to the problems the scribes had in recording these songs, because the language was changing and the syllabary already was not a perfect fit. So there are 1,553 of the songs, but many duplicates, and there are 120 fushina or melodies. But most of the songs are one of two particular melodies. So this leaves about 1,200 or so distinct songs that scholars have been puzzling through since the early 1800s. I should have put this up too, just to give some context. Shoshin, who unified the kingdom, did so in 1429. And if we go several hundred years ahead, 1879 is when Okinawa Prefecture is established. It's absorbed into the Japanese nation state. In between is a calamitous event that took place, 1609. There's an invasion by the Satsuma. So the period that I'm going to be talking about and the songs I'm talking about are primarily about the period between 1429 and the demise of the prosperity of the Shuri, or the Ryukyu kingdom in Shuri, which was 1609. The kingdom lasted until 1879, but the Ryukyus were a vassal of the Satsuma after 1609. 1945 is the Battle of Okinawa, and then a prolonged American occupation. 1972, Okinawa returns to Japan. This is a, let's take this 1 second. I wanted to talk first about how I am standing on the shoulders of so many researchers who have made reading or understanding the Omoro Sōshi far easier. Iha Fuyu's the ethnologist I mentioned, starting in the Meiji period, he began tackling the text. And Hokama Shuzen followed Iha Fuyu, and there have been successive scholars, but these were the among the first, and I call them the sons of Okinawa, playing on the word san tida, Okinawa no tida. So this is Hokama Shuzen's Omoro translation. Came out in 2000 in 2 volumes. And this is the most beautiful recent translation published by Yumani Shobo and edited by Hateruma Eikichi. It's 2 volumes. Other notable scholars, in 2021, Leon Serafim and Rumiko Shinzato, who is an affiliate, I believe, of our department, wrote or published this book, The Language of the Old Okinawan Omoro Sōshi. And it's the first major work in English, a real watershed moment about the language of the Omoro Sōshi. Prior to that, the University of Hawaii Press had published a work that is a cultural history based on the Omoro Sōshi. Couple more things. These are comprehensive histories of Okinawa. George Kerr wrote an early one for Tuttle Books, 1958. It's written from the perspective of an American who is showing the difficulty that Okinawa had at the hands of the Japanese in the Battle of Okinawa. And some have said that that bias is in place to justify the prolonged occupation of Okinawa by the US. So it is comprehensive, but there is a perspective, certain perspective that Kara takes. Gregory Smits has written prolifically about Okinawa. This is a book that's coming out this fall, and it's a comprehensive history. He's also written one called Maritime Ryukyu. He's written another on the figure Sai-on, a Confucian leader in Okinawa. Right. So we'll start with this. Now I'll go back, sorry, to the what this looks like, and why I'm so grateful for the translations that I mentioned by Hokama Shuzen and Hateruma. This is what the manuscript looks like. The top page is the cover page. The second part of the slide has the table of contents, so you can see, I can just read a little bit of the far right, but what the different volumes contain. That's in the middle slide. And then in the lower part of the slide, you have a omoro. And so the omoro look like this. They're written from top to down, top to bottom, and then right to left. Nothing unusual about that. The very first line indicates the melody for this song. And then you can see in this, oh, I have a pointer, line 2, there is the number 1 right here. This indicates this is the first verse, and then it continues. And then another interesting thing about the manyoshi, or the Omoro Sōshi, is yes, you have the first line indicated this way, and then you have this character mata that indicates this is the second verse. Here's another one, mata, third verse, mata, fourth verse, and so on. So the omoro have ichi and mata, and sometimes at the bottom there'll be an indication in the modern translations that there is a refrain. So that is what the poems look like visually. They are sometimes short, sometimes long, as short as 5 lines, as long as 40 lines. So here is one from volume 12, gives you an idea of what the content is. I have the poem itself over here, and I'll read a few lines, but I won't torture you beyond that. So this is from volume 12. It's Omoro 719. And the melody, it says, is urasoi fushi. So urasoi melody. So you see the number 1 on top. That's the first verse. Seiaro kuni osoi. Oe zato mori ore wachi e. Momoto agari. Fumi agate. Cha uare. Second verse. Gearu kuni osoi yo. Third verse, Keo no yokaru hi ni, Keo no kiagaru hi ni, kaori yo wa sadakete, amae yo wa shidakete. An English translation, rough English translation, is before you. This is about the priestess Seiaro Kuni Osoi appears at Uezato Grove. Then you have another priestess who's performing her dance. The first priestess, again, there's a repetition. You see at the bottom, the emphasis on the sun. This is a recurring motif in the Omoro Sōshi, the sun. The sun is the power source from above that the priestess's channel for humans, especially the king. So Shoshin, so that Shoshin can do all the things that he does, the conquests, the gathering of jewels and other items that he needed for the kingdom. All right. The first print version of the Omoro came out in 1924. Iha Fuyu worked on that. The subsequent, or I should go back up by saying that the volumes of the Omoro were published separately. So the first one came in 1531 when Shoshin was still in rule, and then the second one in 1614. So that's volume 1, volume 2. And then volumes 3 to 22 came out in 1623. So this is shortly after that terrible invasion by Satsuma. And the thinking is that those numerous volumes came out at that time in an effort to preserve all of the customs and events and auspicious conquests that the dynasty had experienced as it was falling into decline with the invasion by the Satsuma. So the text of the Omoro Sōshi was destroyed in a fire at Shuri Castle in 1709, and a copy, which had been in the hands of the Gushikawa family, the hereditary holders of the office of chief recorder of Omoro, was presented to the royal court. In the following year, because of the fire, 2 copies were made, one for the Royal House of Sho and another version with annotations between the lines for the Aniya family, which held the hereditary office of Omoro Nushidori. So what I showed you, not here. Oh, sorry. What I showed you earlier was the Sho version, which is a version that went missing in the Battle of Okinawa. People thought that it was destroyed, but was later found in the possession of a military officer in the United States. So Dwight Eisenhower commanded that that version of the Omoro Sōshi be returned to Okinawa, and it was returned and remains in the Okinawa Prefectural Library. That was not the version that most scholars used, though. That was the Sho version. The Aniya version had annotations, and it also had punctuation. So people preferred that for their copies. So I showed you the table of contents. I wanted to give you an idea of what kinds of things we can read about in the Omoro Sōshi. There are 22 volumes, as I mentioned, and the songs roughly fall into the categories of priestess songs. Priestesses are very important. They have that power that they've gotten from the sun, and they stand between the deities and humans, right? And there was a system put in place by Shoshin called Unarigami, in which each ruler sister would be a priestess with the power that the soldiers and others needed to do what they needed to accomplish. So he formalized this. In the 18th century, wasn't sisters but wives, but until then, the sister of the brother ruler would offer protection from the power that they receive from the sun. So the position of women in these castle, fortress, harbor areas was very, very strong. So the 22 volumes are roughly in these categories: songs of the priestesses, regional songs, dance songs. Chris Nelson, if you're out there, volume 9, I think, is about what they called essa, related to today's Asa. There are numerous songs about ships, navigation, 2 volumes, 10 and 13, that have what are called eto, or songs about boats, labor songs. And volume 13 is the longest of any of the volumes in the collection. So there are many, many, many songs about ships. There are songs of court ceremonies and songs of famous singers. All right. I want to say a little bit more about the unarigami. The Omoro, we know, is the most important Ryukyuan collection of songs, many of which are sung by priestesses. The priestesses' importance is tremendous. They're the mediums between deities and humans. Onarigami Shinko, or belief, became a prominent feature of Ryukyuan folk religion in this early modern era. Women in the Omoro dominate the spiritual realm, and priestesses use their power to protect the king and society in general. So recognition of the greater spiritual sensibility of women dominated recognition that women had this greater spiritual sensibility was a basic tenet of Okinawan religion until Confucian morality spread in the Shuri court in the 17th century. I wanted to, as my title indicated, say a word about flora and fauna. The landscapes I found were mostly about regional areas within the kingdom. So we have volumes that are devoted to, for example, Nakagusku. We have volumes, of course, devoted to Shuri because that's where the kingdom was. Volume devoted to Kume. Kume Island is very, very important. It has iron there. It was used for producing boats and other materials. And it's also where the 3 women, important priestesses come from the north. One of them stays in Kume, one goes to Shuri, and these priestesses are able to intervene in many of the events that take place in the period that I'm discussing now. So other of the areas include Naha, Urasoe, Chatang, Yomitang, Ginowan, Gushikawa. All of these have places in Omoro. Katsuren and Gushikawa are important. Osato, there's a whole volume about songs from Onna North that's very interesting. Chinen, Sashiki, Gushchan, Omoro, Komesu, which is Mabuni today, Itoman. So you can see that this is a very inclusive, right? Inclusive collection. And that is what really impressed me when I started to look into this. So I'm going to go through a few of these. I won't read the Japanese, but go through a few that caught my eye and had something to do with flora and fauna or this belief system. So this one I've spoken about, the priestesses, the connection with the sun, setting up a plentiful world, setting up a peaceful world. So as a modernist, this kind of Omoro fit my preconception, I thought, as a poem that shows how peaceful and plentiful Shuri was, that this was a counterpoint to what Okinawa has experienced in the modern period, the invasion of Satsuma, the Ryukyu shogun, in which Okinawa is absorbed into Japan, decades of assimilation, the Battle of Okinawa that destroyed most of the island and killed 200,000 or more people. And then that long occupation, which some would say hasn't really ended because we have a concentration still of bases in Okinawa. So for me, this kind of poem was really refreshing and delightful. And that's what I focused on when I first looked at the Omoro Sōshi. Here's another poem about an eagle, and eagles recur in the collection. So you can see there the poem is there on to the right, and here's the translation: powerful eagle. I think it's Oniwashi, envoy above the ship's mast, protecting us, and so forth. So eagles are a common metaphor for royal power in the Omoro and in folk songs generally. They served as a kind of power animal for kings on land. There are other poems that feature these eagles. So if you think about the ecological context, though, of the Ryukyu Islands, there aren't eagles there. So these are imaginary eagles. There are eagles in other parts of Japan. So and even in the Ryukyus, there are small eagles that live in the JIA Islands near Taiwan. But the large birds, the ones that we imagine from reading these poems, don't exist in Ryukyu. So this is an example, I think, of the kind of northern orientation you can find in the Omoro, where features that one might read about in Japanese collections show up in the Omoro, right? It's a powerful image. So there's one more before I switch gears. This is a fun one. I like this one. So it is from volume 9, it's 505. This one doesn't have a melody noted, which is a bit unusual, but happens sometimes. And you'll see what caught my eye. In terms of flora and fauna, it was the turtles and the dugong, which is a manatee that is sometimes seen still in northern Okinawa. So deity who protects our ship, calm the waves, calm the waves. The captain takes issue with the man from Tokashiki, just an island in the Keramas. Reaching the sandy beach through a gap in the reef, the man, seeing the ship's bounty, asks, "Have you caught turtles? Have you caught dugongs?" The captain answers, "No, I don't know." Off we go. So it's a kind of a strange one, and I didn't know why the captain would have answered the way that he did until I read some of the commentary about this. So apparently many poems exist that pair turtles, dugong, and bountiful harvests. So these are thought together as showing a great bounty. So apparently this man from Tokashiki knows that the ship is full of all these treasures, probably wants some of that also. And yet the captain, right, refuses to give any information. So at the time, the turtles, it's a symbol of longevity, and the dugong, it's an elixir of life. They used it also in cuisine, but it was not permitted for anyone to capture dugong because they were only for the king. And the dugong, so probably this captain was on his way to give the turtles and the dugong to the king as tax. It was a form of tax. And so there are many reasons for the captain saying, "No, I don't know." If one captured a dugong, then apparently they were cursed for 7 generations. So there is another reason. All right, so now I'm going to show you that after reading about the priestesses and their power and how they used them, this power for the king and the eagle and how powerful the eagle was, and it guided the soldiers through the ocean. And this last poem or song about the dugong and turtle, I had in mind, you know, a very inclusive collection of songs. And then I went back to volume 1 because that it really sets in place the power of Shoshin. And I didn't put the full poems, but volume 1, Omoro 31, 33, 34, 35, 36, and then skipping to 11, have a lot of language about the conquest, right? So the great sibling king will conquer the great lords, he will rule the world. The power of priestess Kikoe Ogimi, the venerable king, and the soldiers of Shuri Grove, potent ship Seari Tomi, potent ship Teori Tomi. So the Ryukyuan ships don't have maru at the end of it. They have Tomi, which is interesting, fine. So they bewilder the hearts of the Yaeyama and Hateruma soldiers. They cut them down like the dirt. So this campaign was a key campaign on the part of Shoshi. What really was what led to his ultimate success in unifying the principalities in Shuri, the capture of Yaeyama and Hateruma. You have another one where the priestess descends to Sefa, today Sefa Utaki, to protect, to watch over the venerable sibling king. She chooses an auspicious day, and with each day she prays for calm. But again, she is, it is mentioned here, right? The conqueror of Ishigaki, so one of these outlying islands in the southwest. 135, again, one of the priestesses dispatches spiritually powerful soldiers. The king adds to his territory. The priestess pacifies Ishigaki and returns. Shiploads of soldiers pacify Yaeyama and return to their great country. 136, the priestess transmits spiritual power. The soldiers of Shuri Grove acquire land widely, adding to the king's domain. The Kimi Hai priestess, this is a priestess from Kume, added Yaeyama and Hateruma. When the soldiers fell, bewitched like caught fish, the priestess ruled their land. In the last one, I highlighted the word rope. The venerable ruler, all the way to Yaeyama and Hateruma, forever the venerable ruler, extends the rope, extends the line, forever the venerable ruler. So this word rope, nawa, Okinawa no nawa, is there to let us know that this is how they express adding territory. They roped, right? Roped islands in. And then you have all of this too in volumes 10 and also 21. So you can see more of this description of conquest. Soldiers attack metal gates, pressing the attack. They take up great swords and wield them. They cut down 70 men. They cut down 100 men on Gibo Hill, such as Shuri and such as Shuri Castle. Priestess comes up with a strategy, and the soldiers wearing helmets, wearing armor, bearing shields adorned with bovine images, bearing colored pikes, attack wood gateways, metal gateways. And then the last one, the resplendent king of Okinawa, Okiniya, in the Omoro, the captain, the lords and lord of lords, the lady lords, all of them offer splendid goods to our ancestors. We did not obtain them by asking, but by stealth. By stealing, we attained them. We stashed them in sacred wine jars. So we have here an admission, right, of theft, and along with some of the other descriptions of the conquest. So this is what changed my view. I was a naive reader of the Omoro Sōshi. I thought it was all going to be about peaceful islands and prosperous trade. When I started to look carefully at how the volume or the collection establishes Shoshin's power, this is what I came across again and again and again. So I'm not saying that the invasion of Satsuma was a good thing, not by any means, but there were plenty of invasions by Ryukyu kings of neighboring territories going on through the whole of the Ryukyu kingdom. So as a modernist, the myth of pacifism in the Ryukyu era, yeah, it just completely shattered after this deep dive, sad to say. But I'm not going to end on a dark note because we have a lot of darkness in our lives. There are wonderful, wonderful treasures in the Omoro, right? So many of the poems or the songs have been adapted into later literature. The Ryuka followed. So the Ryuka, you can think about as analogous to the Waka. Waka is 57577, but Ryuka are 8886, lines of 8886, but in Ryukyuan language. Also, the Kumiodori has taken many of the events of the Omoro Sōshi and adapted that material into this kind of theater, a little bit like Chinese opera in Okinawa. So that's what I tend to focus on now, all of the development of other forms that began with the Omoro Sōshi. I wanted to share the last of the poems. Actually, this is, even though it's in volume 9 and 22 is the last volume, this probably was the last Omoro written. And this is, well, I'll read it. When the northerly wind blows, I wait only for the ship of my king, the ruler of the lords. When the tailwind blows, I long only for the ship of my king, the ruler of the lords. So it's this very sad Omoro, and it's sad because this is after the invasion by the Satsuma of Ryukyu, and the then king, forgetting his name at the moment, was taken as a hostage and imprisoned in Satsuma. So his wife is waiting for his ship to come back. He did come back, actually. So he was not in prison forever, but it is a sad poem. Nife debut. I forgot in my nervousness at the very beginning, I have there, not a typo. You can see if you read Japanese, I wasn't thinking about mai tais, you know, in my reveries. I wrote hai tai. Does anyone know the song Haisai Oji-san? Yeah, there's a song, Haisai Oji-san. A lot of people know the word haisai. It's like hello. But haisai is used for used by men. It means hello, male. But haitai is for females. So that's what I have there. Haitai. And then at the end, anyone know what this is? Nikkei debiru. Thank you. So Paul, I believe, is going to moderate the questions that come from Zoom, and then I can do that here. I was asked to remember to give people a mic if they have a question to ask. I also was asked to let everyone know that the Tateuchi East Asia Library is and may already have a exhibit about the Omoro Sōshi with the various resources the library contains. So Kiwa Tashiro contacted me and wanted me to let you know that you're welcome to go browse and see and learn more about the Omoro. Any questions? I have a lot of odds and ends I could share with you, but I'd love to hear your questions. Jay? Jay.
Just, wonderful. How much of this kids in Okinawa get exposed to? Do they read this in the school? Do people teach this so that kids get some sense of their own unique culture there?
So the short answer, I think, is no. Okinawa, since the Meiji period, has adopted standard curriculum, right? And there's not a lot of time for much more. There are supplementary volumes I've seen. I have a couple of them I picked up over the years of about local culture. I'm sure the Omoro Sōshi is mentioned in them. And so if a teacher were so inspired to include that somehow, that would happen. But I don't know of any kind of systematic, we're going to read the Omoro because we read Kokoro, in other parts of Japan. No, I don't think so. Oh, sorry. There was another question in the front. Can I? Oh. We'll get you.
Thank you so much for walking us through this wonderful text. I have so many questions regarding the Omoro Sōshi, but I'm about to just only 2 questions, probably about the content, the form itself. So first one about the form. There's a scholar, as you mentioned at the beginning, that the Omoro probably should be pronounced as like Umuru in the Okinawan language. So in that words, so even though we saw the text itself writes as like in hiragana as Omoro, but maybe during that time they read it in the very different pronunciation. So also like for the first line, we have this kikoe ogimi. However, in Okinawan language, it probably be pronounced as chifi ufijin. So I was wondering, how would you comment or say elaborate on at that time how people read? Well, because it's a song, it's a poem. How people kind of perceiving them, especially nowadays, we read those Okinawan writers' texts. They kind of enthusiastically kind of like using the dialects,
Mhm.
but using such as like Midoruma Shun himself, like using like a similar way. So I was kind of wondering about that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I can't answer it fully, except glad you asked because I probably didn't emphasize enough how much power is given to the Shuri dialect, right? All these songs from various parts of the Ryukyu Islands were collected, but they weren't transcribed using that local language, right? These are different language. They're not always mutually intelligible. And so everything's in Shuri dialect and then even, or Shuri language, I would say. And then over the centuries, it's hard to say how it was spoken at the time because a lot of the songs don't have dates. We know that when the volumes came out, but they're not dated. So they could be from as early as the 12th century, it could be the 15th century. And language is changing dramatically over that time. So I don't know. I don't have an answer. Mhm. There was a question in the front here, and I know, Paul, you said you had a question. Let's row 2 here.
At the very beginning of the talk, there was a lot of wording about priestesses.
Mhm.
And then at the end, we got to kings being the military foe.
Mhm.
Could you talk a little bit more about the male-female thing and what's going on there?
Yes. So this system, the unarigami system, is one that Shōshin put into place. So the king's sister is the high priestess, and that would be in Shuri, right? But then so in Japan you have the shogun and then the daimyo. They are in charge of the han. In the Ryukyus, they're not han, they're aji. Every aji has its ruler, male, and then the sister of that ruler, and that would be right a female. So there's the male female kind of dual sovereignty, dual sovereigns. So priestesses are they're in virtually every poem. If they're not there, they're certainly responsible for the goings on because they are the ones who stand between the deities and the humans. So all the good things, and they're all good things. Well, depends on if you're on Shoshin's side, right? For Yayame Hateruma and the soldiers that are killed, not good. But yeah, it's all good. There's no deaths. It's surprisingly rosy if you look at it kind of superficially. Thank you for the question. Paul?
Thank you. I've got a couple questions online, but I'd like to ask a question of my own, which is about sources. And the time span mentioned in the handout is for the 1531 to 1623, which is pretty far well advanced in East Asian literary history in Japan and even more so in China. Japanese have been writing literature for 1,000 years or so. The texts that are in the Omoro Sōshi, are they, would you characterize them as indigenous, or would you characterize completely indigenous, or them having been influenced or shaped in some way? It reads a little bit like the Manyoshu when I look at the sort of the tone and the subject matter, shaped in some way by literature in Japanese or literature in Chinese or something else.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Yes, I think Hokama Shuzen likens the Omoro Sōshi to the Manyoshu. And yes, I think that there's noticeable influence from writing in Japan, writing in China. I was trying to figure out myself, since the Ryukyu kingdom pays tribute to both, which was more prominent, you know, the Chinese influence or the Japanese. So we have, so I really don't know. I'm not an Omoro scholar, but there are plenty of songs that have the pine, the bamboo, you know, things from landscape in Chinese. Sakura, there are only 4 poems that have sakura in them. And the sakura poems aren't laments about how fleeting the bloom of the sakura are. They're praiseworthy poems about how radiant and kind of robust the cherry blossoms are. So I think my gut is that the Ryukyu kingdom, of course, they were aware of these larger powers, right, and the cultural spheres, but they were also kind of indifferent too. And there is a fair amount of autonomy in what they take on as a subject. So there's a lot about castles, shipbuilding, navigation. These are things, maybe there are other sources that are Japanese and Chinese that I'm not aware of, but I think there's a lot that's very unique to the Ryukyu Islands. Like volume 13, with all of the kind of sea shanties, these boat songs. Yeah, it's a good example. So I'm kind of leaning towards the autonomous indigenous over the either Chinese or Japanese.
Thank you. I'm moderating the online discussion, so I should at least ask one question that came in over online. We've got some comments about how great it was. One question here is about the level of literacy during this time period. And I think this is a broader question about the transmission and dissemination of Omoro Sōshi, about whether this was written down and meant to be read, or recordings of, you know, records of what people were already out there singing, and general idea of transmission, oral versus written.
Yeah, I think most of what I've read has suggested, well, there isn't a language, right? A Ryukyuan language. So there's plenty of expression, but it was oral expression. And Hana was not introduced till 11th century. So yeah, most people, of course, the court is different, are unlettered. They're unlettered, right? People, and the importance of recording the songs was it wasn't an anthropological decision to collect, right, these songs so that we can know what happens in Hateruma or in Yoron Island. It was, we're appropriating this territory and this land, and we're going to represent your songs in Shuri language because Shoshin is the king. It was a political decision.
Thank you. So you've given some wonderful examples of how we see commonly occurring plants from Chinese and Japanese literature show up in the Omoro Sōshi. I was wondering if there are any indigenous plants, especially since we're talking about sort of sense of place, if there were any particular examples that you liked or you thought were notable of indigenous plants appearing in the Omoro Sōshi.
Yes, yes. I do have a list of some of the indigenous flora and fauna. Just need to find it. But I remember from compiling the list, one item, a kunibu, which is an orange. I've written a chapter on a story called Kunembo or Kunibu, the orange trees. There are many kinds of citrus in the Ryukyus, and Kunibu is one. Another example of the local flora and fauna is Daigo. Daigo is the prefectural tree that shows up in the Omoro. And there might be others. Maybe you can find me later and I'll find my list. Yeah. So yes, there are indigenous plants that come up as well. In the back.
Um, what efforts have there been to preserve the Ryukyuan language at all? Oh, sorry. What efforts have there been to preserve the Ryukyuan language at all in terms of the alphabet and just spoken dialect?
Yes, that's a great question. The question is what efforts have been made to preserve the Ryukyuan language? I believe UNESCO has called them severely endangered. There are prefectural efforts. There's a day called Shima Kutuba no Hi. So there's awareness, right, that the languages are dying. Of course, scholars, linguists are working on this. There's a friend of mine I introduced students to a couple of years ago who works very actively, Byron Hija. He has radio shows, TV shows, made curriculum to teach people in Okinawa about their languages. The University of Hawaii published recently a book on basic Okinawan. So University of Hawaii is great supporter and proponent of languages, and probably the only place in the United States that offers courses on languages from Okinawa.
I have another question from online. Is that okay?
Yes, Paul.
Another question from online. This is a question, is there still a genetic pool of indigenous Okinawans? And I think this is a broader question about what DNA research might have taught us over the past few decades about who the Okinawan people are, were, and where they came from.
Yeah, I'm glad this question came up. I can't answer it. I don't know the DNA of the people, but I can tell you that that scholars have studied the migration of Japanese from southern Japan into the Ryukyu Islands. One of the things that I found really interesting, one of the fun finds I found was that people from the Heike, right, the ones who lost against the Minamoto, they had to find, somewhere to go. And a lot of them wound up in the Ryukyu Islands. The Minamata, I think the Taira people avoided Okinawa Island because there was a Minamata person there already. So they needed to steer clear. But yeah, these Heike refugees were in the islands, and many Japanese who'd migrated from an earlier period. Yes, Naomi.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. Is the original language of the island Ryukyuan? You also said Shuri. So are they the same, or is it an offshoot of Ryukyuan that became the Shuri language? And is the Omoro Sōshi it's compiled in the Shuri language. I know it's over many years. You said that there's a king, a Shuri king, who did the compilation of all these songs and dances.
Yeah, so when I use the term Ryukyuan and Ryukyuan languages, I'm speaking about all the languages from Amami, northern, central, southern, Ryukyu. All of those places have their own language varieties. Shuri, I don't think I pointed it out. I think I assumed everyone knows. If you've been there, you know there's a Shuri castle where the manuscript was burned. There was a fire just a few years ago, and it's under reconstruction now. But Shuri is near the airport in Naha, so it's in southern Okinawa. And so yes, that's a particular language that gained a lot of power and authority during the time of Shoshin. Yes.
This map doesn't show China.
No,
Looks to me, China is closer than Kyushu, from what I remember as a geography.
Oh,
So what is the influence of Chinese language or Chinese songs or whatever for Ryukyu people? I'm talking about 12th century or 16th century, that kind of. China was pretty powerful at that point.
Yes, it's very powerful. And yes, there was tribute to Ming China. One of the Omoro contains Chinese phrase. I think in the transcription, it's tasho, many thanks, right? So I think that's the only instance of language, Chinese language in the Omoro direct influence or inclusion. But of course, a lot of the cultural motifs, the metaphors can be said to be from China. There was something else that your question made me think about. I think most of the very strong Chinese influence took place later in the 18th century with Confucian morality in Okinawa. So we have, Japanese also. Yeah, so I was just speaking about China there. So Japanese influence. So I think Paul asked a similar question about that. That we have certainly cultural influence. Some of the metaphors like the eagle, powerful eagle, right? That is something that you see in Japanese poetry. And it shows up in the Omoro Sōshi, even though there aren't these big eagles in the Ryukyu Islands.
Hi, Davinder.
Yes.
I think a lot of us are still struggling with this one concept of the Ryukyuan language or Shuri. Did it have its own syllabary or its own script? It did not, right?
Did not.
That's what I think.
No, if it did, I think that the Ryukyu Kingdom and the area now would have much more power. Right. It doesn't.
And so everything was being through either hiragana or some Chinese characters.
That's right.
Adapted. Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Thank you.
No written language of its own. Jasper, in the middle.
So first I wanted to say thank you very much for a wonderful talk. And the question that I have is going back to the system of the priestesses, the Onarigami religion, you mentioned at some point that there was a sort of shift between the main valence of that being brother-sister to more of a husband and wife dynamic. Is that something that happened in this time period that the Omoro Sōshi collects from and no? Okay.
No, it happened later, I've read, in the 18th century. So beyond the collection. There is one Omoro, though, now that you mention it, I know you're very interested in the system, Jasper. I didn't include it tonight, but a lot of times you'll see something like the sibling king or the this king, right? Showing again the brother-sister, the sister protecting the brother. But in one of them, the priestess is mentioned descending to a place where she sees her father, and the father's clearly the king. So I don't know, I haven't come across any explanation, but it was noted, like, this isn't the usual, right? It's not brother, sister, but sister in front of the father. Have you come across anything like that?
The only thing that I saw a little bit of suggestion of that same thing in the reading that I was doing for the seminar paper for this last quarter is that there is some degree of variance where, depending on region, if there isn't a sister to serve this role for a brother, that it can either be taken on by a I think first cousin is as one of the preference, or it can take more of a usually father-daughter valence. So not mother-son, but in the other direction, that can be sort of a substitute for the main brother-sister type of relationship there.
That's interesting. Thank you. Paul?
Yes, I have another question online. I apologize if we don't get to all the online questions, but this one is from a student. And the question is, how much interest is there today from young people in Okinawa in regards to preserving the Okinawan languages?
Okay, so the question is, how much interest is there on the part of young people to preserve the Okinawan language? It's another question I can't exactly answer. I wish I had them before me. I could ask the same. Yeah, maybe I'll just say, a bit about language that's spoken there. Since Meiji, and clearly after post-war, everyone's learning standard Japanese, but language, there's a lot of variety, and there's a mix too, right, between local language that a child might have heard from his or her grandparent and what they've learned in school. So often that's called Uchina Yamato Guchi, right? So Japanese that's flavored with Okinawan. I imagine that most people who want to have career aspirations have to be very have polished Japanese, and that's what the focus would be. And in my own circle of younger people from Okinawa, I know there are many who are interested in knowing how to play the sanshin or learning how to do dances. And that can come with language acquisition too, right? Local language acquisition. So there's some, but I can't answer the question fully.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much again, Professor Bhowmik, for a very thought-provoking lecture. And thank you also, Professor Atkins, for helping with the Q&A. And thank you to all of you for attending this evening's lecture. I hope you enjoyed the lecture as much as I did. And again, let me remind you that Tateuchi East Asian Library has a special exhibit to enable people to learn more about Omoro Sōshi. And let me just say, there will be another Washin Kai lecture this fall, and I promise it will be another exciting one, but at this moment, I don't have enough to make an announcement. So please look out for future event information in coming months on our website, washinkai.info. So now please join us in the Walker Ames room to enjoy Okinawan treats and cultural performances. Thank you.